Have you heard about this personal and professional podcast?
Coaching in Session
with your host, Michael Rearden.
I don't know if you are familiar with the idea of perfect, where everything is exactly how you would like it to be. You have the perfect house, you have the perfect family, the perfect career, job, mindset, and everything is going according to plan. But even though everything is perfect, there are going to be times in your life when things are not perfect, when things go astray and there's hiccups, and you wonder, why can't my life be perfect again? Well, it's not the idea of always being perfect. It's about understanding that perfect might be the ideal, the thing that you will want to reach, the goal if you want to consider it, but it's not necessarily the determining factor if you're happy, if you're making progress, or if you're just a person that's enjoying life, the simple things, right? Because I can look back just at what we're doing here on Coaching in Session. We had many, many mistakes along the way. Some editing issues and video issues, and there's always something that even though technology is so great, sometimes it's not so great. Sometimes it does the wrong thing, and sometimes there's user error like last week or the week before. So we had some audio issues here on the podcast, and I'm sure you probably heard it, where the audio sounded different, where you're like, wait, why does it sound so different? And it's because for some reason, the microphone didn't want to work and it switched to a different microphone that we don't use. And I'm like, what in the world is happening? We have a different mic. We have a different thing going on. And it's a learning lesson for me because even though I know to be paying attention to this, sometimes you're so focused on doing the episode, you have other things, other obligations, you're in a rush, things don't turn out exactly how you want it to. But this is not only for the podcast. This can be in your general life too. Maybe you're a young student in schools and maybe you go to school one day, you have a test, maybe you studied so hard for this test, right? But guess what? You studied the wrong thing. All the questions on the test were not the questions you studied. And I don't know if this has ever happened to anyone, but it is rare. It is more rare for a student to not study and then they get a bad grade and say, whoa, that wasn't perfect. That wasn't good. I need to figure out how I'm going to make progress so I can get a passing grade. So when I get my report card, my mom and dad don't freak out on me. Now, this idea of grades is going to be what we're talking about today primarily because we can look at perfectionism in our life on the houses and the cars and our bodies and things like that. And we can have a full conversation on that. But I wanted to get to the root cause of what perfectionism truly is. And it's this idea that we need to be at some place or pinnacle that is going to make us feel adequate. Because if we don't have the A+, if we don't have the BMWs and Ferraris and the cars that signify some level of wealth in our life, well, we should maybe look at our life with a fine tooth and comb and see why we are living in such meager strides. But that is not what reality is, right? Reality is there's going to be so many hiccups and mistakes in our life and ups and downs, and we're going to get failures. We're going to get D's. We're going to get C's. And I'm not saying that this is, your fate that you're going to get these grades, and I hope you don't get them. But those grades can be a blessing too, because it makes you human, number one. And then it is going to give you this idea of you are challenging yourself. Because if you are always getting these A's, right? Maybe you're really good at studying and you know all the content, right? Sure. But it's also going to have some effect on your mind. Now, an A+ is great. I'm not saying that you shouldn't strive for an A+, right? You want an A+, go get it. But what I'm saying is if you get a B versus an A, now you can say there's more things that I need to learn versus I have mastered this. And rightfully so, mastering and learning are going to be two topics in our conversation today. When it comes to learning, we need to be able to see as learning as something that's going to be forever. I don't know if you have checked the statistics, but they're not good. After the age of 18, reading in adults drops significantly. Like you have to ask yourself, well, after school, I guess I don't have to read anymore. When did this happen? Right? When did we get this idea of learning stops at a certain age? Progress stops at a certain age. Struggle stops at a certain age, because it doesn't matter if you're 65 or if you're 16, the struggle can be paramount, because that struggle can help you break through finally, right? We can look at the KFC guy, Colonel Sanders, 65, 67 or something along those lines. He creates KFC, and you might ask, he had 67 years of failure and all of a sudden success, right? A 16-year-old has maybe no failure, and he's like, or she's like, whoa, I made it. I have all this level of success. And we can look at TikTok stars, and we can look at people who are on YouTube and Twitch and video games and stuff like that, and they make it. I know there's a guy named Ninja, like he played Fortnite or something, and he's this big time video gamer, and he makes a lot of money playing video games, right? So it's a dream for many young men, especially, to go out and make all this money playing video games or being streamers and things like that, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But then maybe you start and maybe you are having a hard time with it. And you're like, oh, I'm not going to be consistent. And you have to ask yourself, why are you not being consistent to the thing that you would like to accomplish, your dreams? Well, oftentimes when it comes to the goal that we have, we don't want all the hiccups and all the failures along the way. We don't want to deal with the progress. We want to deal with the perfectionism. We want the A+ only. We want all the admiration. But the thing about winning in life is not always about being on stage and being admired because you have done something great. All the failures that you have are basically buried underneath your success. So when you finally are on stage, when you finally are in front of the camera, when you're finally in front of millions of individuals and people in the world, then you might forget about all those failures. And let me tell you something about those failures. Those people don't care about them. Now, some people might, right? They might say, well, how did you get here? Let me learn from your failure so I can learn from your wisdom. And so I can get to where you are quicker without all the hiccups and all the pitfalls. Yeah, well, it's not always about, trying to mimic people for their success, because when it comes to failure, there are lessons that we need to know. I like to think of it in weightlifting, right? You see someone lifting, let's say, 500 pounds. It doesn't matter if it's a squat or bench. If you're lifting 500 pounds on a bench, kudos. If you see this individual lifting on this weight, you're not going to say, well, I just need to fail to lift this 500 pounds, and then I'm going to be able to lift it, right? Because I learned from that person, right? Because they failed. And sure enough, I'm not going to make the same mistakes they did. And I'm going to just lift this 500 pounds. It doesn't happen instantly. We have to build, right? Sometimes failure is going to be necessary in order to build. So when we're at the gym, we train until failure, until we can't lift that bar anymore. We're trying to lift it and our arms are shaking, our body is shaking. Everyone in the gym is looking at you like, what is wrong with this person? And you're like, I'm trying to fail. When is the last time you tried to fail? I'm not talking about like, you're like, I'm going to go into this job interview and I'm going to fail and I'm going to be like, whoa, I failed that thing. Yeah, that was nice. And then go home and have a pity party and complain about why you're not being successful. I saw a video the other day. It was a woman who went to college. She got a degree. She got her piece of paper. She sends it out to all these jobs and everything. And she doesn't get any hits. And if she does get a hit, she gets an interview. But the interview doesn't turn out well. Well, there's a couple of things that are going on there. Number one, she's not allowing herself to get any experience. She's looking for compensation for the work that she's doing. Now, one of the things she could do, let's say she's a designer. She can make designs for people, for businesses. She can literally walk into a flower shop, say, hey, I have a degree in art and design. I would love to create a pamphlet, a flyer for you. And the only thing I'm going to charge you is for the paper that I use. Is that something that would be of interest to you? Maybe they'll say yes, right? You're not charging them for your services because maybe it might be quite a bit of money. But if you're just charging them whatever it is, 17 cents for a piece of paper, I'm sure they will say, well, let's spend $5 and get a couple of sheets of paper or whatever, and let's pass those out around the neighborhood, right? That builds momentum. Now you're like, okay, now I have this flower shop that I'm doing art for. You might do the business down the street. And before you know it, you have people calling you for you to do work for them at cost. So that means you're now making money. But, you just can't say, well, I have this piece of paper. I did all the work. And now all of a sudden, I'm expecting to get some type of job or career from it. It's not always given like that. We have to go through the paces sometimes. Now, if you are in a profession where you are like a teacher, maybe some type of trade person where you have to go through the apprenticeship in order to get your licenses and stuff like that, and you work under a master carpenter or plumber or electrician, you go through the paces naturally. Versus is like, hey, I want to do some home repair. I want to be a handyman or woman. Well, sure. Yeah, you can put that out there and you can show a couple of your projects, but the probability of you getting those hits that you want are going to be less than someone who has done the work because it's about the craft. Now, people, when it comes to trades, people will say, well, if I can save $10, I'm going to save $10 and go with this person versus the quality of the work. I believe it's about the quality of the work that we're putting out rather than the notoriety of we are this or we are that, because everyone can show, hey, I got this A+, right? We can go back to school now. I got this A+, and everyone's looking at your life and, sure, yeah, you got this A+, but what does that mean for you, right? When you go home and you show your mom or your dad this A+, and they're like, okay, good job, right? Now it's almost like an expectation, right? Because if you ever got a B, they're going to say, what's wrong with you, right? Did you not study? And now they're going to maybe belittle you for that, right? But if you had just the B+ student who's maybe getting D's and F's, and now the parents like, I'm so proud of you for the B. So there's different levels of progress when it comes to grades. And grades do this thing in our mind is that we think we need the highest grade. We think we need 100. And when it comes to like even ourselves, like using 100% momentum and diving into our potential, it's something that we have to look at wholeheartedly, because maybe some days you're not going to give 100%. Maybe you have 50% to give. Do you give all of that 50% though? So we need to be very clear on how much we're doing and how much we're giving, because everyone wants something. Everyone wants money. Everyone wants a change. Everyone wants a good relationship or a big house or a fast car, but they don't want to do the work. They don't want to deal with the progress, because progress can be painful. Progress can be ugly, because when we're looking at mistakes that have happened, one of the things that you're not going to do when you're successful is always looking back at all your mistakes and saying, you know what, all those mistakes I made, let me ruminate on those, right? You're just going to bask in the glory of your success, what it is today. Yeah, you're going to look back at all the hard times. I think back like college, when I had to work full-time and part-time job, and I had to go to school 18 plus credits, and it was not easy. And then when I finally graduated and I look back, I go, how the heck did I do that? And sure enough, I didn't keep up with that momentum that I needed or used or utilized. And so I started to do the wrong thing. I started to watch movies, and I'm not saying watch movies are like the wrong thing, but I started to do it copiously, and I wasn't getting any benefit from it. So all of the hard work that I did or I was used to was kind of becoming unraveled, and comfort was seeking into my life. And I said, you know what? I don't want this to be my forever situation. I want to change it. So I started to give myself things to do. I started to go to yoga and Bikram, and I started to go to the gym more, and I started to go hiking with my dog and go traveling. And I started to do all these things that were fulfilling. It wasn't about, well, let me make sure this trip is perfect. Let me make sure this hike is perfect. I prepared. And that's the key. I prepared for whatever was going to come my way, and whatever happened, good or bad, I accepted it. Because in life, some things are going to happen that you don't want to happen, whether it be family issues, business issues, relationship issues, friendship issues, whatever it be, health issues. things are going to happen and you're going to say, why me? Why does this happen? Our life is always on a pedestal in a sense because we're focused on it. Not many times will a person say, let me focus on your life and try to make your life better. Of course, there are going to be some people. There's a YouTuber, his name is Just Nate, and he goes out and he spends his earnings from YouTube to buy homeless people sleeping bags and food to eat and clothes to wear. And I'm sure he's not thinking about, well, let me look at my day and how I can take it easy. He's going out there in the blistering cold, making sure people are taken care of. There's going to be people like that. But then again, those people are far and few between. But then I'm not saying that we should be looking, far and few in the cracks and not look at those people, right? We're just trying to focus on ourselves. And this is not what we need as people. We need to understand that progress is going to happen, but progress will not happen if we don't happen to progress. What does that mean? Progress is the intention of doing something, whether you win or you lose, where you succeed or you fail. And when it comes to the idea of progress, people think progress is just linear. Well, progress is not always like that, because one day you might be really good and then the next day you're not doing too good. I think of people who are struggling with drugs and alcohol. Yeah, they want the perfect life where they're away from those things maybe, but the progress might not be straightforward for them. They might have one day where it's really good and one day where it's really bad. Maybe they relapse. For them, it's like, I failed. This was not what I wanted to do. But we change their way of thinking. If you make a mistake, if you have a relapse, if you give in to your urge for a beverage or for a drug, let's figure out what we need to do next. Let's learn from that mistake. So people are so afraid to make mistakes that they're like, hey, don't make mistakes. And sure enough, they live their life trying to be perfect. Do all of these takes and try to be perfect and put on all this makeup to try to be perfect, to be ideal. When's the last time you spoke to someone who was just real, who was just like, hey, this is who I am? And I think those are the best people to marry. So if you just marry like a real person, I think of Tony Robbins. You don't have to like the guy. Tony Robbins, his wife is just like more real than most of the keeping up with the Kardashians and things like that, right? All of that's fake and all that's drama and all of that's just, TV show stuff. But when you get a real person, it's like, hey, let's live life a little. Those people, whoa, they're going to teach you that perfection is not necessary, and they're going to be teaching you progress is the way. Because if we make progress for something, right? So let's say, we are a C student, then we become a B student, then we become an A student. Yeah, sure. Maybe our identity, changed and shifted to that A student. But the reality is we are forever learners still, right? So there's an underlying thing to the goal that we have often. So we say that we need this fast car. We need to be this entrepreneur. We need to be this successful businessman, comedian, model, whatever. And then when we finally get it, we just say, well, I'm this successful singer. No. You're still a rapper, right? I don't know if you ever spoke to a rapper or something before. They're real, because most of those rappers come from nothing. They come from the ghetto. They come from the streets. They come from hardship, and they found a way out. Sometimes they have this idea of, well, I'm this big pop star and, you should love me. And those people typically don't make it. The people who make it long term are the people who realize the struggle. They realize the hardships that they had to deal with and face all on their journey. Just because they reached a certain point in their life, they didn't create that ego, right? We can look at a certain case like Diddy, for example, right? He allowed his ego to come in and say, hey, this is who I am. I'm the king of the world. Sure enough, it bites him in the butt, right? So we can look at someone's life is so perfect. They have all this money. They have all this love and admiration. And sure enough, there comes a time when things are not exactly how they will like it to be. Sure, they can put it on a front. Sure, they can say things are okay. But the reality is that the progress that, helped build them and make them, they buried, they forgot. And I think there's something to be said about people who will look at things that are mistakes and they take ownership in them. As I said with the podcast and the audio, sometimes the audio is not what I want it to be, or the microphones are switched and there's a whole issue with the edit or the guest. And I mean, there can be so many things that go on in the podcast or in the business, and it might not be ideal, right? I might not consider that, this is the ideal for me, because if you ask what the ideal is, I can think about it and I can, spout out some numbers and I can, say something. But the reality is, if I ever reach that number, the ideal that was there would go away, right? The perfectionism, the top that I reached, 100% that I reached, I would want more. And it's the human nature, right? We want more. We want to do better. Now, of course, you can allow your mind, you can train your mindset. Think of monks, for example, where they can just give up their materialistic goods and they can go off and live in monasteries and they meditate and they pray and they live a very simple life, where that might not be you, right? You have to figure out what type of person you are, I believe, because then perfection is different. Because for them, perfection might be, for monks I'm talking about, not allowing their mind to run astray, not allowing the idea of an outside stimulus to have control on them, whether it be people, materialistic goods, mindsets, whatever. If you want to get into the internal, there are things that they're looking at that they don't want. And there are things that they want that they are going to be vying for. Peace, typically, right? They want to be peaceful. They want to be able to live in the moment. Now, of course, is their practice always going to be perfect? No. Some days they're going to feel cold and they're going to say, oh, it would be nice to have a blanket. And it's not saying that they can't have a blanket, but the idea comes in their mind. They realize at that moment that even though they are at peace, it's not perfect. They would like something else. And so in life, we might want something else. We might like something else. We might think of, oh, it would be nice to lose a little bit of weight. Oh, it would be nice to have a little bit more money to go on more vacations. Oh, it would be nice to have this car, this type of clothes, or this type of purse. And we can go down the line of all the things that we would want. But it's not so much about the idea of getting 100% of the things that we want or desire all the time. It's about understanding and mastering the idea of progress. Because if we are going for something, right? I use the analogy of an apartment. When I first got my apartment, I said, I'm going to be a minimalist. And sure enough, I got just a bean bag, and then I got another bean bag, and I was like, I need a coffee table, and I got a couple plants, and I have a whole thing of plants. I said, I already got a TV, got a bed. I said, oh, we need dishes, and we need more dishes. And before you know it, the apartment is full, right? And then you get a house. Oh, well, I brought everything from the apartment, and there were so many holes in the room. And I'm like, oh, that needs a nightstand. This needs more plants. Oh, this room needs a bed. This needs a desk or something. And I'm going in this idea of, well, what does this house need versus what do I need? Because many people, if they had to go through their garage or their closet, they will find things they haven't used in years. And I'm not saying that my life is one of those, right? I have many things in my garage that I use when I need to use them. For example, we have like shears and stuff for bushes and things like that. I use them maybe like 3 times a year. Okay. So do I need them? Can I rent them? Can I just have the landscaper do all the work that I want to do? Yes, I can have all of that done for me. But it's more so of the idea of, well, maybe I might need them one day, right? So we have this idea that one day, things are going to be exactly how I want it to be. And if it's not, I have the tools to fix it. Well, we all have this idea that we can make progress, right? We can declutter our home and we can, get rid of the things that no longer serve us. But what about your mind, right? The house is easy. You can get rid of things very quickly. You have a garage sale, right? But our mind is more challenging because we were raised to believe that we need 100. We need an A+. We need the top of the line. When the reality is, what do you want? Well, you get to decide. We can master the idea of being okay, We can master the idea of having what we need right now. Because if you're living, you have exactly what you need, right? Typically, you have air, you have a body, you have a mind. Now, there's things that the body needs: safety, security, shelter, right? So we are going to be looking for those things and vie for those things. And sure enough, when we get them, now we are comfortable in a sense. So we try and we dare for something more. So we say, you know what, let me try to get this. And sure enough, you get it. And if you want to keep it, you keep it. If not, you get something else. So there's always something else. And I like to, put this in the term of goals, right? Our goal behind a goal, where we have a goal to make sure we don't make mistakes, or we have a goal to make sure that we are more interactive and we're more present. Sure enough, we might keep up with those things, very similar to New Year's resolutions, where you give yourself this idea of momentum and progress. And you're like, okay, great, I'm doing what I need to do. But then somewhere you slip. Most people who slip, they just keep on sliding. But then there's going to be, maybe 30% of people who don't slip, right? They make progress and they understand that progress is the key. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. So whatever it be, whether it be too much things in your house, too much things in your career, in your relationship, in your day, whatever it is, you say, hey, I'm going to be making sure that I am being better, right? We look at the idea of being better than the day you were before. Now, what does that mean, right? Were you not adequate the day before? No, right? We take away the negativity when it comes to perfection and progress, because mastery is not so much of mastery in the sense of you can't learn anymore. It's just the idea that you can be a teacher today. The idea that you can teach others to see that, hey, I'm not perfect, but I can see where I make mistakes. And so when I make a mistake, I look at how can I turn this mistake into something different? And the different thing is not so much of a success all the time, but a lesson, because we learn from our failures. We learn from our lessons. And I'm not saying that you need to always be seeking failure at the gym or seeking failure in your relationships and life and your career. But when you do, you have an opportunity to grow and to learn from them. You should be, hungry for those successes. You should be hungry for those A's, but then you should also understand that A is not the end. That good relationship is not the end. That big house is not the end, because the people who get the end that they thought was the end realize it's just the beginning. So there's so many things that we have to understand. Progress is going to be enduring. It's going to be continuous. And that is what life is until life is no more. You're not going to say, oh, I can't wait till I'm 40 years old. And then after 40, whatever happens, happens. No, right? You might say the perfect life is at 65, right? I live until I'm 65 and then life ends at 65. No, right? We can't just tack on perfect to everything, right? The only thing that's perfect is the idea of religion. And some religions, of course, when they think of their deity creating something, creating the world or a person, right? They made it perfect. But when it comes to human nature, perfect is just another word for progress, right? We made progress to this point that we got to our goal. And now we can understand that there's more to it. There's more to come. This idea of learning, this idea of progress and enhancing ourselves is going to be something that people are going to be enthralled about. And some people are going to be, dismiss about. They're going to say, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with progress anymore. I just want to coast. Well, in life, if you're coasting, you are not paying attention. And before you know it, your life is going to be out and you're going to wonder where time went. So I encourage people to look at the hardships, to look at the struggles, to look at where they can enhance themselves and say, hey, let me change things. Let me enhance myself. Because yes, maybe today I'm not perfect in my eyes or not perfect in someone else's eyes, but at least I'm making progress. At least I'm better than I was. Or even if you have fallen 100 steps and you are nowhere near the person that you once were, begin to build again. I know people who struggle from illnesses, cancer, strokes, whatever it be, heart attacks, and they lose the ability to walk or to do some of the things they love, but then they start to build their strength back up. And sometimes we have to fight our way back to who we were or maybe even better. So yeah, sure, we might not be perfect right now. We might be fighting for it every single day. Write what you want down today, whether it be a goal, an ambition, a dream, just this idea of what a perfect thing would be. And then when you finally get it, pay attention, because you're going to realize that what you once thought was perfect was literally just something that was the stepping stone for the next thing you desired. So desire is going to be what we're striving for. Yes, there's going to be caps on certain things in life, like a test. There's 100 points on a test, and a teacher can give you more if they want. When you reach that pinnacle, right, when you reach that 100%, understand that test, that piece of paper that had 10 questions, 20 questions, or 100 questions is not what life is. Life is not 100 questions or 200 questions or 500 questions, whatever it be. The number of life is endless amounts of questions. It's endless amounts of challenges. It's endless amounts of learning lessons, and it's always going to be that way. So we just have to give ourselves the mindset that it's not about perfection, it's about progress. And the more progress we make, the closer we get to fully living life for what it truly is, endless in a sense.